Hey y'all, we'll take a quick look today at perhaps the most famous monologue, Shakespeare's, among them, and that would be Hamlet's "To Be or Not to Be." And just read through. I haven't prepared or thought about anything. I'm showing you how to interact with the elements of art based on my synthesis of art theory and religion, the religious function. Um, just showing you how to interact with the elements of art, with the abstract, energetic variables and relationships which artists of all forms use to pass irrefutable meaning holding properties and qualities, and therefore pass messages which not only include the mundane, physical, conscious, but also include um, information that is limitless, include the aspect of our reality which is um, infinite or endless. And so also their irrefutable particularity, which is an infinitely specific way of understanding the meanings and values of the universe that they exist in, which inspired them to pass a message to you, to show you what they've found that was so nourishing. So let's just jump right into it. Not too long, just try to have some fun and really interact with that which is irrefutably particularly presented to us without any assumption. Um, so here we go. Well, we hear to be or not to be. That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by asleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, to sleep. Perchance to dream. Ay, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death what dreams may come, when we have shuffled off the mortal coil, must give us pause. Okay, so sight reading a little bit, trying to patch some meaning in there. Um, so to be or not to be, that's the question. So he tells us from the beginning. The question is a matter of being or not. He doesn't say what that means. He doesn't say to be alive or not to be alive, to be a physical body or not to be a physical body. No, he says to be or not to be. And as is clearly and explicitly shown in many of his works, the idea of being or aliveness, death or extinguishment of death, the physical demise, are something to be reevaluated and questioned in all of his work in the metaphysical context which inspires him and which he passes you. So he says to be or not to be. So the question of this is a matter of being or not necessarily of death, though, this idea of death and physical death and suicide is, brimming in the play. He says, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. And so we see that there's this question of the mind, like this abstracted space. Um, and this idea of nobility. So there's like the presentation of ethics, maybe morals or ethics, um, and so we see presented whether it's nobler to suffer the slings and arrows, or to take arms against to see it troubles, and by opposing end them. So we see it put in question about what the mind thinks of itself, whether the mind thinks that it's noble to suffer the invariable negative chance, the uncontrollable, unknowable, indefinable factors and forces. Is it noble to suffer them, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them? Which isn't to say, again, that opposing is suicide, or that not being is suicide. Perhaps it is to be which takes arms against a sea of troubles. The question is to be or not to be. This is a question of human existence. What does it mean to exist? He says that is the question. And then whether it's, and again, he shows us in the mind, is this a question of thought and types of thoughts? Is it better to find yourself noble by struggling up against these slings and arrows? He shows also one of the things we're talking about, the uncontrollable, unknowable, unforeseeable factors and forces of the universe, or to take arms against them. And that's his presentation. And then we hit a colon. He said, this is what we're talking about. This is the way that we're looking at the topic at hand. And then he says, to die, to sleep. And we see suddenly that death is just like a sleep. He shows us maybe also that death is something to be questioned. That maybe like sleep, it's not an extinguishment of the self. When you go to sleep, you don't disappear. You just change. A sea change. That's a reference to the Tempest. Suffer a sea change. What is it? 5 fathoms? What is it? Da 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 da, thy father lies. Full fathoms 5, thy father lies. Of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. And he says like, none of them that doth fade, but suffer a sea change. It's just a change, to die, to sleep. So we see that, again, just like being, also death is put into question. Just like in 71. No longer mourn me when I am dead. Sonnet 71. To die, to sleep, no more. So we also see there's like the question of non-existence, unconsciousness, and death are all equated and all also put into question. And then he says even more so, and by a sleep of those three things, and by a sleep, just to say we end the heartache. To say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. So we also see that the order of the presentation of subjects or topics: to die, to sleep, no more. We could think of these in multiple ways. We could think also that the meaning may be to die, to sleep. Both of these, no more. There's no more unconsciousness. There's no more just simple physical death. And he says, when he talks about a sleep, that there's an end to the heartache and the shock that flesh is heir to. That is like all of the actual pain and suffering that humanity exists. And so we see that one of the things being solved here by opposing, by being, or by not to be, by the solution being to be, and by opposing the sea of troubles, instead of being nobler and suffering against them and struggling against them. By actually opposing them, by taking arms against them in a different way, by being, in the sense that he's trying to get us to, there's no longer death or the unconsciousness of sleep. There's no more the heartache and the natural shocks. That is, the pains of the human condition. Our being subject to a sense of confusion, self-doubt, isolation, knowing infinity, but also knowing uniqueness, and therefore finding ourselves in the sense of contradiction and mistrust, um, ego fear driving us to isolate the self even more when we really seek reconciliation. These natural shocks, these things that the human flesh, are heir to, this heartache, this sense of disconnect, um, are ended. And if all of this was a question about, are we just talking about suicide here to solve? Maybe this is the simplest thing, but are we talking about just like suicide to not experience anything? Is that this whole beautiful thing just to say a simple sentence? Why would he just not just say that? And we see the next sentence, "'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished." And we see immediately he says, hey, this is about being devout. This is also about consummation, coming into one with another thing or other things. The removal of these things, he shows that by opposing instead of suffering the things, but to take arms against them by consummating with them, by becoming one with them, and therefore to be, is devoutly to be wished. This is what we seek in the religious function. And so we then see he goes on to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. As if we see this to sleep twice in a row, an easy literary manifestation of infinity, that it's to sleep and then to sleep, two distinct things which are actually the same. Um, this same repetition, to sleep and then to sleep later in sequence, means that they're both to sleep and they're also the first to sleep and the second to sleep, and that's an actual tracking of infinity or duality in the abstract world. But it also gives us a sense that he's thinking about this as he's saying it, to die, to sleep. And there, again, put in question, is just sleeping and dying, is this just a change? Which is an implication of infinity. If we live in an infinite context, when our physical organism degrades, devolves, falls apart, dissolves, disintegrates for whatever reason, whether we enforce it or time does, uh, isn't do we where do we go? We just become something different. We become the energy of the universe that we're in, or in which we came from and which we were in the whole time. So he's saying this, and to sleep, and then to sleep, he starts thinking about the sleep thing a little bit more, and then he says to dream. It's a little improvisation, a little stream of consciousness. And then he realized that's the problem. That's why we're not just doing it, because we don't know what it is. There's the rub. For in that sleep, that permanent one, what we think, what dreams may come. And so we realize he's fully equated dreams and sleep. He's fully equated our fear of, in this part, he's equated our fear of the dreams itself, because we know that we are able to have dreams which make us fear. Therefore, we're shown that not only is fear the issue, but dreams are consequential. We're shown by the end of this that, hey, your thought, your very thought in dream, your very unconscious thought in sleep, is as consequential and real as anything else. It could make you be or not be. This is what we have to consider when we're considering this. Dreams are, by the end of this, when what dreams may come must give us pause. That's, he's showing us that not only is all of this written, it's his idea put down and portrayed through the shadows of his light and the actors, but that it's dream itself, again, direct reference to the end of Midsummer Night's Dream. It's the dream itself which is proof of the consequence, the self-changing, fear-inducing, um, nocturnal emission producing consequence, the very real thought which is in question here, which is the thing which says, what's the question? The question is to be or not to be. It has to do with that. It has to do with the thing that gives us what determines to be or not to be is the dream. It's the reality and the consequence of the dream. It's that thought is of an equal reality. And to take arms against the sea of troubles is actually through that. It's the way to take arms against the antagonist is to unite it, like in Hermes Kirikion. It's to unite it through a concept that would equate unconscious thought and conscious thought with material reality and physical reality. Sleep and death become the same, just changes. And we realize that to be or not to be is the question. And it's not a question of death, it's a question of what we do in life. What metaphysical context allows us, instead of suffering in some sort of made up, opinionated nobility, to act and find a way to justify coming into selfless interaction with everything of every type, even dream itself, these fictional thoughts, the fiction that's written here, to come into real interaction, selfless interaction with it, to treat it as an equal. And so to end these troubles by opposing them as troubles, to treat them like the dream, like the physical, the energetic, the thought, the abstract, the fiction, as equal and limitless potential, when we know that we live in a context which is infinite, where the implication is that all things have an equally limitless potential for meaning and value and truth. And this consummation, this union, is devoutly to be wished. It's the religious function to provide us, whatever the religion is, to provide us. Even Shakespeare himself, a messenger of the most important metaphysical messages, an artist prophet. It's this consummation, this union by recognizing oneness, that we're in an infinite context, and eventually the implications of that through guides like him, is a consummation, a union devoutly to be wished. It ends the suffering. It is the way to take arms, and it is the way to be. It's never a question of to die. That's not to be or not to be. We're talking about what humans should do now, and that is give pause and realize that the biggest thing we're worried about is the biggest thing we could be worried about is the dreams. The dreams themselves have an equal consequence. And it's devoutly to be wished, which is this is the consummation. This goal is something which is the religious function. Any religion, any messenger of any type, any link in the chain of messengers pass this metaphysical information they found most beneficial through the abstract world, which allows infinity or this aspect of our reality, this infinite aspect of reality, into human expression. It allows them to tell us the metaphysical context which is most inspiring and beneficial for them. And it's the religious function, along with them, to provide endless different paths, more and less sympathetic to each epoch and people and culture and type and race, and to give us paths, to as many paths as possible, to finding a way to reconcile this infinity or this limitlessness that humans have always taken account of with our uniqueness marked consciousness, with a consciousness that recognizes irrefutable particularity, to give us paths to justifying infinity and its implications in ourselves, and so to come into a most beneficial interaction, one which interacts and treats all things of every type, state, and nature, the uncontrollable and unknowable and enigmatic and antagonistic, just like the dream or the thought or the unconscious or the fictional, to treat all of those as equal to the physical mundane, treat all things knowing that they have their irrefutable particularity, their specificity is only defined by an irrefutably particular way of being related to all other things in an ever-changing context, and so that all things of every type, state, and nature have an equally limitless potential for meaning and value and truth. And it's when we do this, when we're able to use it through the religious function, able to autonomously justify um, selflessness, complete giving, unassuming when coming into interaction with anything of any type, when we not only interact with the limitless or the beyond, with the unknowable and uncontrollable factors and forces, the indefinableness that we all have taken account of, that humans in particular have taken account of, but also the limitless aspect of each thing, that their irrefutable particularity is ever changing, that it is only irrefutably particular in that it's nothing else. And so it's only by relationship that it is what it is. It only is what it is not. It's when we come into an interaction with everything of every type that our resources increase exponentially, that the mind we have, which recognizes both the infinite, limitless, dual, endless, and the specific, the irrefutably particular, is fully engaged. Both sides of what we recognize are fully engaged. We come into an interaction with the specific that reflects an awareness of the limitless in it. And from this, selfless interaction arises exponentially increased meaning and value and truth and connection. It's a consummation devoutly to be wished. And this is to be. To be human is to engage these awarenesses, which we as a species in particular hold an awareness of infinity and uniqueness. And so the function of religion is to allow us a path to reconciling them, because in our minds, when we turn around 15 and become conscious of our uniqueness, we immediately feel the rest and the limitless and the enigmatic and the dual to be separated from us. And this is what puts us in our human condition. This is like the yeah the natural shocks that flesh is heir to, this feeling of isolation and separation and mistrust and not quite understanding, this yearning to understand why we recognize that we're in this incredible, amazing, interwoven, limitless thing, but we're also this one specific thing that needs to survive. And so we are to find our path to consummation over the next 15 years, from 15 to 30, and hopefully, following the hero's path, um, achieve our enlightenment. Thanks for joining the School of Smirk, and I recommend to be.